Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I normally talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. Doing something a little bit different, though, this time. I'm going to catch up on comics published in December when I come back, when Essential Issues Weekly comes back from hiatus in mid-January. But before going on hiatus with this series, I wanted to offer you guys some picks, personal picks of mine, of DC comic stories that are Christmassy or take place during the Christmas season. It was just a couple of weeks ago, I think, that I released a kind of an installment of Thanksgiving-themed comics. Those were really hard to come by. There are so many more options for Christmas stories throughout the publishing history of DC Comics. But I found myself being quickly very particular in what I wanted out of them. So much so that, ironically, the ones that are typically labeled as holiday specials or Christmas specials or whatever, I was just not at all interested in what I was reading, largely because they were just overly light and silly, or they were being kind of weirdly preachy in a way that just did not make sense, because, of course, there's just a very vague sense of what Christmas is about among those who are creating content for as wide an audience as possible. They don't want to get too Christian-y, and so either in the older comics that DC would publish that focused heavily on Christmas, you'd get this really secularized, vague idea talking about things like the Christmas spirit, or maybe you'd get as far as generosity. Very, very rarely would there be references or any kind of focus on actually the birth of Jesus, the life of Jesus, anything like that, you know. And then, of course, when they get more and more modern, at least the ones I've had time to catch up on this season, they tend to branch out and like, okay, well, let's also talk about Hanukkah, let's talk about Kwanzaa, let's talk about any other holidays that we can scrounge up that are roughly this time of year and try to give them equal space. And so I'm not really interested in that. It's just a bunch of substanceless stories, you know, that are lighthearted and cheery and anyway, so what I found, though, I took a different approach, and I thought, I know I've read some comic books about, in books, series that I was already following, characters that I was already reading their book regularly, and when December rolls around, they would have a pretty normal story in many respects of that character, but they would sometimes put it in a Christmas environment or have a little bit of a Christmas theme running through it, sometimes more heavily than others. And when I started kind of going down this route, I found much more satisfying, much more interesting, much more impactful stories, just better stories than the ones that were really marketing themselves as holiday and Christmas and stuff like that. So, but there's still so much I haven't tapped into. I think I'll probably do this again next year. I know I'll be reading more Christmas comics after I record this that I won't talk about until then. But what I've found so far, mostly focusing on, I want to say, the 90s up through about 2010, 2011. The last thing is really from that rebirth era, the beginning of that rebirth era of DC Comics. That's kind of like the realm I seem to be kind of playing in right now. And I'll go in roughly chronological order, starting with The Flash number 73, and this is Mark Waid's run. This came out December 15th, 1992, The Flash 73. Now, like I think pretty much all the stories I'm going to feature here, this is a pretty one-shot type of story, so you don't need to be aware of the continuity leading up to this. I mean, there's references to different things, but I think we just kind of understand as comic book fans, there's going to be references to crazy stuff going on. It's just a big, rich world that we're playing in when we read comic books. But this is largely just focused on this individual story taking place on, I believe, Christmas Eve, and Wally West and Jay Garrick are kind of out superheroing, and the main focus is on a woman who goes into labor, and they need to help her out. Her husband is not with her. She desperately wants her husband to be there, but we find out that he is off committing a crime. He's been convinced, kind of pressured to help some others commit a crime, and he's in the middle of doing it. He really regrets it. wants to change and give back the money he's in the process of stealing, but then his cohorts show up and they continue exerting pressure and things kind of advance from there, and Wally and Jay get involved. It's not like an especially memorable story, but it's still solid enough, and it ends with the kickoff to a major event. If you have not read The Return of Barry Allen, the storyline that was part of Mark Waid's run, then the Flash 73 would be potentially a fun way to kick off your reading of that over Christmas break, because the stinger at the very end of this leads into that story arc. And despite the name of that story arc, if you haven't read it yet, I'm not going to spoil it, but despite the name of the story arc, maybe thinking, okay, well, Barry Allen's going to be back, so Wally's time is over. Actually, no, this is a story that really cemented Wally as the new Flash, and it really kind of called him up, forced him to kind of up his game in some really significant ways. So in some ways, this is a really great place to start reading this era of the Flash if you haven't yet. I mean, I would recommend reading some stuff before it, but I mean, if you're going to start maybe somewhere other than his origin story, the Flash 73, neat place to start. Already you get a sense of the Flash family with the Garricks, Jay and Joan Garrick. You also get a little early snapshot of his relationship with Linda. They're just becoming a serious couple just now, and of course many years later, for many years in publishing history, they have been married. And so it's kind of just an interesting little time capsule and a neat place to jump on if you've ever been considering reading some of the Mark Waid era of the Flash. So anyway, that's the Flash 73. Then next, we've got Green Lantern number 59, written by Ron Mars, published December 20th, 1994. And this is the Kyle Rayner era of Green Lantern, where Hal Jordan went nuts, became Parallax, and had a big showdown and stuff. And now Kyle Rayner is the only remaining Green Lantern, and he's very new at the job, figuring stuff out. The ring works differently for him. So again, this is another kind of time capsule thing of like, oh yeah, this was a unique time in the history of the Green Lantern character concept. Well, this one, although it takes place on Christmas Eve, I don't feel like it has even as much as the Flash 73, I don't think Green Lantern 59 has as much of like a Christmas theme it's trying to push, some kind of an emotional catharsis so much. Basically, Kyle has recently joined the Titans and is on monitor duty on Christmas Eve, got stuck with this chore, and he's just kind of bored, but ends up in a showdown with the kind of newly reimagined version of Polaris, a classic Green Lantern villain, master of magnetism. He's kind of like the Magneto of the DC universe, but in this issue, he's got like a new look, and we begin to explore his multiple personality disorder, which was kind of a recent twist on his character brought in at this time. I don't remember if they really stuck with it long term after this, but anyway, yeah, so it's got like a Christmas environment. They have a fight in Times Square with the giant tree in the background. So this is more about just a one-shot story of Kyle getting into a mess of things while he's on what he thought would be boring monitor duty, but with trappings of Christmas all around it. There is some backdrop of his relationship with Donna Troy. They were in a very serious relationship at this time, so there's a little bit of, I guess, quote-unquote romance, but it's hard to even dignify it by calling it that, because I felt like Kyle was bouncing from one relationship to the next. Yeah, he did stick with Donna for longer than most, but even so, and there's not a lot of depth there in the writing in terms of how their relationship is kind of fleshed out. But anyway, yeah, but I think if you're a Green Lantern fan, if you remember this era fondly, that Green Lantern 59 could be a nice one to pull out on DC Universe Infinite to read during the Christmas season. Next up, we've got the Spectre 26. This is the John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake run of the Spectre. I believe art this time looks like it was done by John Ridgway, but the inks still have that really dark, shadowy vibe to them that I really appreciate about the art in this run. This one was published 1994, December 20th, so the same week, actually, or the same day as as Green Lantern, what was it, 59 or whatever. So the Spectre 26. This is an interesting story. During this run, Jim Corrigan, the human host of the Spectre, had befriended a priest or some kind of Episcopalian, I think is the denomination he's a part of. But like Father Kramer, I believe is his name. And he is kind of like someone that Jim / the Spectre goes to for counsel, for advice, as kind of like an anchor for his humanity so he doesn't go over the deep end in various ways. And when he asks Father Kramer like what he would like for Christmas, very offhandedly, Father Kramer says, well, I would love it if for one night on Christmas Eve, no one murdered anyone else in New York City. And he said that really offhandedly, didn't think how the Spectre would really react to this. But the Spectre went off and was just committed to making sure no murder happened in New York City. And in this depiction of New York City, that's a lot to ask for. I don't know what the stats are or have been in New York City for murders per night or murders per night on Christmas Eve, but oh my gosh, he was working overtime. And one of the things I like about this story and about the series in general by John Ostrander is the recognition of sin in humanity. I don't know that a comic like this could be written by DC Comics today, because this is just not a popular idea to recognize, other than recognizing maybe, rich people, rich business people as being evil, and the rest of us are all great, I guess. But no, the Spectre really acknowledged, more broadly than some other comics, just the problem of evil in the hearts of humans. And in one scene, as the Spectre is just trying to spread himself all over New York and just kind of be present everywhere as much as he can, it takes great effort on his part, he momentarily gets this awareness of people in a way that he doesn't normally have. Their beauty, their warmth, but also their cruelty, their hate, their selfishness, all these things. And it's overwhelming to him. And as he's kind of overcome by this experience, he asks himself, is this how God sees people? And he's got tears coming down his face. And it's a powerful moment. And certainly I bring my understanding of God from the Bible to that kind of moment and reflect myself on the fact that we are such a mixed bag, and far more dysfunctional and flawed and sinful than we even realize. But that doesn't take anything away from our value. I think typically what people will do, and arguably kind of maybe what's implied a little bit in the Spectre 26, is that we are morally a mixed bag, and so in some sense our worth is kind of mixed. But what Scripture teaches is that regardless of our moral output, we are immensely valuable because A, we're made in the image of God, and B, God himself chose to invest in humanity so much that he chose to live, suffer, and die all as one of us in the worst way that you probably could. And to do all that so that we could be in relationship with him, living with him forever. So if that investment doesn't speak, an uncountable amount in terms of what worth it assigns to us, I don't know what does. It's Romans 5:8 that says, God shows his love for us and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So even in our sin, God sees immense worth in us. But even so, the tears going down Spectre's face as he's asking that, is this how God sees us? It just made me reflect on the immense love of God and just the depth of his love and in some way, just the emotional, I guess, pain or it's hard to kind of figure out exactly how God experiences emotion, but whatever analogical language we can use to try and express that, the pain that God brings upon himself as he invests in us with all of our sin is really, really something. But of course, then just a few panels later, you've got good old Father Kramer basically teaching some kind of pantheistic universalism, saying that like we're all an aspect of God, or some kind of nonsense. But this series theologically is a very mixed bag, and it's got a lot of mess in there as well. But even with the mess, it also contains a lot more biblical concepts than presentations of God anywhere else in mainstream comics that I am aware of. So, so definitely, kind of a mess, but also some beautiful stuff in here too. Very thought-provoking at the very least. And again, that's the Spectre number 26. Then we've got Green Lantern 109. This is originally published December 9th, 1998. This is during the time when Kyle Rayner flew off to space to restart a new Green Lantern Corps, and he left his then-girlfriend Jade. Remember, I mentioned that he jumps around a little bit? Well, yeah, Jade was his next girlfriend, if I recall correctly. He lasted maybe second as long with her. I can't remember exactly how long they lasted. Maybe longer now. I can't remember. Anyway, so... but he left his girlfriend in charge. And... So while she is kind of serving as Green Lantern, in this story, she runs across a mall Santa and recognizes his voice, and it brings back traumatic memories of her past. And I should say at the start that I would not recommend reading this if you are likely to be really disturbed or triggered, as they say, by stories having to do with sexual abuse. It doesn't get explicit, but it is strongly implied to the point of being undeniable what they're referring to. So this is a very dark and heavy story, and it deals with the reality of some evils going unpunished, at least by our human justice system, or even in this fictional world, what vigilantes are capable of bringing about. So there is a great heaviness to it. But if, like me, you appreciate a weighty, heavy story now and then in your comics, and you are also a fan of the Green Lantern mythos, then Green Lantern 109 can give that to you, and with a very clear, strong Christmas backdrop. Next up is JLA number 60, published in November 28th, 2001. So this is part of the Mark Waid era of the JLA that was originally started by Grant Morrison. That was the first comic that really, in a long time at least, had brought the Big Seven together, focusing on the most well-known heroes of DC Comics all on the same team. And in this story, Plastic Man is trying to get a young boy to agree to fall asleep, to settle down and fall asleep. And to do that, he agrees to tell him the story of how Santa Claus became a member of the Justice League. Because when he said that, the kid didn't believe him, and so Plastic Man then proceeds to tell a story involving Santa Claus being a member of the Justice League. And you can pretty early on tell that Plastic Man is just making this up as he goes along. But what it does is allows a story where Santa Claus is a main character, but it's supposed to be silly. I think that it's really tricky, even though it can be interesting, it's really tricky to have Santa Claus be a character that is actually real, that these adult superheroes are interacting with, as opposed to the childhood fantasy and fable and stuff that he is in the real world. So that can just seem a little silly and inconsequential. And so the workaround here is that it's happening in a story that Plastic Man is telling. And then you also, as the story is going on, you're getting a glimpse into Plastic Man as a character, and you're seeing how his personality, his ego, different things like that are influencing his representation of this completely made up story in his head. And so I definitely got multiple chuckles out of reading this one. And it's got some good art too. It doesn't skimp on that. Some good action and stuff like that. So it's a nice little sampling of the era. That's JLA number 60. I think my favorite of these comics that I just was refreshing my memory on this time, it's got to be JSA number 55. And this was originally published December 10th, 2003. And this is the Jeff Johns era of the JSA. And it's one of my favorite comic book runs of all time. And in this story, as in many stories that Jeff Johns did at this time, we see the different personality traits, the values, the opinions of the different members of the JSA sort of rubbing against each other, sometimes grating against each other. And so it's a nice kind of showcase of their personalities, as so many issues of this time were. It's also, in a bittersweet way, a reminder of the fact that Alan Scott, for the vast majority of his publishing history, was not a gay character. And there's references to him being really happy to be around his wife and kids in this issue that just kind of make you kind of cock your head and like, there are times when you read Alan Scott stories of the past where you're like, no, this is not a closeted gay man. That at least that was not the intent. There are no indications that was ever the intent of the writers. It was just kind of an agenda thing that happened later on. But I do like revisiting these stories where Alan Scott is more of a traditional father and husband and devoted family man to the degree that he can be, with the dysfunctional situation of his family and his kids. But what took me by surprise, I totally forgot about it, what took me by surprise was the reintroduction of a classic character named Ma Hunkel. Now, when I first read JSA 55, I don't think I'd maybe heard that name. It sounded vaguely familiar, but I didn't know anything about this character. And this is a character that actually existed in DC publishing back in the 40s, and Jeff Johns brought her back here. She was a member of the JSA back in the 40s, but it was just like a forgotten character. And as Jeff Johns did so wonderfully on so many occasions, he brought back from publishing history these forgotten characters and put a fresh coat of paint on them, gave them some more personality traits that are relatable, that make them stand out from other members of the team, and give them a very valuable place in the ensemble cast. And Ma Hunkel coming back really in this issue and going forward, this was not just a one-shot thing. She was in JSA Comics recurringly after this point, and still to this day shows up in some stuff. She really became like this motherly, grandmotherly figure to the JSA, which perfectly complements what Jeff Johns had already been doing up to this point in creating this kind of family type of vibe. Now, today, of course, we've got the phrase found family that has its own connotations, sometimes not great, sometimes I think very sweet. But this was before there was even that phrase kind of circulating around. It was just like these close-knit relationships that were in some ways like a family. We had what I called the Flash family at this time, with the supporting cast of characters that cared about each other so much that they really in many ways became like a family. And that was going on with the Teen Titans under Jeff Johns as well, and certainly in the JSA. And so for Ma Hunkel to be revived as a character and brought back at this point, just instantly, even in the pages of this issue when she's brought back, we see already her playing that role to so many different characters. She just fits right in, and it's beautiful and actually very moving at the end, because she had to be, as he kind of retcons, I guess, she had faked her own death. The government helped her fake her own death so she could go into hiding, into witness protection, basically. And all that time, she had to be separated from her family in order to keep them safe. And so she hadn't been able to be a mother, certainly not a grandmother, in all these decades that she's been in hiding. But now, starting in this issue and going forward, she can really play that role in the lives of a large number of people. And so it's a really sweet moment, and all in the backdrop of Christmas. So, it's another example of how it's not this overly heavily preachy, Christmassy message of some lame platitudes that are meaningless, but rather it's taking the idea of family, which is something that often comes to mind and is very relevant during the Christmas season, and it's just bringing that to the surface with the backdrop of it being the Christmas season. And it's just a beautiful, sweet way to go with universal appeal that doesn't have to resort to these really lame, vague, meaningless platitudes. So anyway, yeah, just a wonderful issue. That's JSA 55. Then we've got, this one was new to me, Batman Detective Comics number 826, originally published December 6th, 2006. This is a nice one-shot story in which Tim Drake, Robin, is out patrolling on his own, gets in a bit of a scrape, and jumps into a car that pulls up next to him, and the driver shouts, "Robin, get in, quick!" And he's like, "Okay, yeah, I get it. It's an out. I don't know who this is, but it's my way out of this really bad situation." Well, out of the frying pan and into the fire, because it turns out it's the Joker. And the Joker basically ties him up, takes him for a ride, and it's got a backdrop of the Christmas season, but that's about it. There's no Christmas message. It's just a dark, kind of scary Joker story, a one-off Joker story, where the Joker does some nasty stuff to people. Like, he is lethal in this story, and Robin, for most of the issue, can't do anything about it. And so we really get a reminder, and I think those kinds of stories with the Joker are very important, that if you keep him too silly for too long, he's not as effective. I think he needs to be lethal, and he needs to be scary. I think it's that dichotomy of him being a clown and yet being extremely lethal, extremely dangerous, and scary that has made him so interesting to me for so many years. And this is a great short Joker story involving that, and also a great Robin story that gets into his character, his motives a little bit, and it's just kind of like a little bit of a Die Hard situation where it's like he is stripped of all his things that normally he would use to get out of a scrape like this. He has to just be smart. He has to be patient. He has to choose his timing well. So it's great to kind of be in that headspace with Tim Drake, trying to figure out, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive this encounter with Batman's most dangerous villain that has taken him to the brink of death multiple times. So, yeah, a great little story. That's Detective Comics number 826. Two more. Green Lantern Larfleeze Christmas Special. This is a one-shot. Published December 22nd, 2010. This is probably only going to interest proper Green Lantern fans who are aware of who Larfleeze is. I think you do need to kind of know who Larfleeze is, and preferably have read a story arc with him before reading this one, so that you do get a sense that he can be a dangerous character. Now, in this one shot, he's treated as mostly harmless, but I think the humor works better if you have previously seen him in a light in which he is more dangerous. Not lethal and dangerous and scary in the sense of the Joker, but just more dangerous than he is in this issue. Mostly he's played for comedy in this, and the idea is he hears about this being on planet Earth that will give you whatever you ask for on December 25th. And so he follows what he understands to be all the rules of making a list, setting out cookies, all these different things, so that he can get this huge, ridiculous list of things that he wants. And he believes that he is going to get these things. And so when he does not get them, and doesn't even seem to have been visited by Santa, he is outraged and almost like goes on a rampage, but Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, stops him and says, "What are you doing? listen, we had a truce, we had an agreement, but you are about to step over the line, and you don't want to do that. So tell me what's going on. And so basically, throughout this issue, he's trying to talk Larfleeze down and explain, listen, Santa is not real. But Larfleeze doesn't want to let go of this dream, this vision of getting whatever he wants. Because as the Orange Lantern, he channels avarice, he channels greed, he's got a hunger for just more and more and selfishness, all that. Now, thankfully, they don't go for an unrealistically sweet moment, which some much older DC comics or those that have like a holiday Christmas branding on them will do. They'll sacrifice character for a fakey feeling sweet moment. They don't really do that. They don't betray his character. There's not like an ending here where he learns the value of giving to others. No, by the end of this story, he is still Larfleeze, and he's going to continue being Larfleeze long after this story. But there's a sweet moment at the very end of this where we get to the heart of Larfleeze and what he really wants most deeply. And I forgot what that was going to be. I'm not going to spoil it. But on the last page, when I had, had a smile on my face and was kind of, lightly chuckling throughout this, not as much as the Plastic Man JLA story, but still, a few chuckles here and there, the rug was pulled out from under me and I started welling up on the last page where we see an item on his list. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's heartbreaking. So it's got some nice laughs. It's got this beautiful, bittersweet kind of moment at the end that really ends on a sad note. But I think sometimes, that's a good thing to kind of feel in Christmas stories as well. And on top of all of that, this issue has like some special inserts that are reminiscent of old classic comic books that would put little activities in them. There's a maze that you can do. There is a cookie recipe, because at one point, when he talks about putting cookies out for Santa, they cut on the next page away from the story to give you an actual recipe illustrated with comic booky art and stuff for the cookies that he made, which are these orange-flavored Larfleeze cookies. And yes, I did years ago take pains to actually make these cookies over Christmas. I discovered that, oh my gosh, this is way more complicated than I want my Christmas baking to be. And sadly, I also discovered I do not like orange-flavored cookies. So that was a lose-lose for me. But for the first time this year, I realized, they also have a Larfleeze ornament that you can cut out and fold and glue and make and tie a string to and put it on your tree. Well, I own the physical comic of this. You better believe back in the day when I bought this, as like, oh, that's so cool, but no way am I gonna butcher my comic book. But then I just realized, I'm reading this on DC Universe Infinite. How about we do a screen capture, and then I'm going to print this sucker out. So you better believe my plans now in the next few days are to make myself a Larfleeze Christmas tree ornament. So anyway, yeah, just a great time with a mix of chuckles and a sweet, sad moment at the end. That's Green Lantern Larfleeze Christmas Special #1. And then finally, as my voice has been progressively drying out, sorry. We've got Shazam Origins, which collects several Shazam stories, but key is the backup story from some issues of Justice League that were published right around the beginning of the not the Rebirth era, the New 52. Sorry, yeah, the New 52. I think I said Rebirth earlier, but it was actually the beginning of the New 52. They were reestablishing origins of characters. Around this time, they switched his name to Shazam. I will always think of him as Captain Marvel. But anyway, this is actually the story by Jeff Johns with art by Gary Frank that the first Shazam movie is based on. So if you remember, that movie takes place during the Christmas season. That's because the story that it's based on from the comics of his origin, Billy Batson becoming Shazam, quote unquote, takes place during the Christmas season. And so this is a great example of, okay, it's not like a special Christmas thing with some cheesy, empty, Christmassy message. No, but it is a sweet story about family, about the realities of conflict in family, selfishness, and learning to love as a discipline and stick up for each other, be committed to each other, even when you don't feel like it. There's some great kind of like family values in the mix. Of course, it's always a mixed bag, but in terms of messaging and stuff like that. But there's some really good stuff in here. And with the backdrop of Christmas, and also, revisiting the origin story of Shazam / Captain Marvel. So I think if you want a little bit more of a commitment, you want to settle into a story, then either Shazam Origins, as you can find it on DC Universe Infinite, or if you start with The Flash number 73, those could be two ways that you could actually start a more lengthy kind of story that you could read during the Christmas season, that in the case of The Flash starts in the Christmas season, and in the case of Shazam takes place entirely during the Christmas season. So anyway, those are my picks. I'm thinking that I'm going to continue reading some, I haven't gotten to like Superman comics, Batman comics. There's other characters that I've followed as well that I would want to see and remind myself, okay, what kind of Christmas stories did they have in their various runs? So maybe next year I'll have more to share on that front. But those are, I suppose, all of my picks for now. As always, I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. If you want to recommend a comic along these lines it's not like a cheesy Christmassy special or whatever, but is just maybe part of a character's comic book run, but a nice little short story that takes place in the Christmas season, I would love to know what I am missing out on. So you can let me know about those in the comments below. And then I hope you check out christiangeekcentral.com. Lots more content made for you there as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.